Good morning, good morning, good morning. You know, these fellowship series that we've had lately is just never long enough. It looked like the moment we just start talking and getting friendly, somebody messes up and brings a microphone and starts calling the clock or something on us, you know. So we're very excited to have you here. Um, I hope you are enjoying the food, and just so you know, we prayed over all of it in the beginning, and I hope you prayed too as you were eating. We know we had great cooks, great food, great service, and we're excited that this is our second event here, and we continue to do safe seating so we can space it out. I encourage people to come early. You know, some of us make early breakfast, some of us are late, and some of us just make brunch. So we left it up to the individuals. But we are excited that you're here, and this is a very special time and a very special session for us. As you know, we were doing Biscuit, Grits, and Politics before the pandemic, and initially we were doing this at the Voice and Viewpoint. And we really outgrew the space by the time the pandemic came along. And so what we're doing here is we want to have this monthly meeting where we're going to touch on topics of interest to us both locally, statewide, and nationally. And when we started planning this, we planned the first 3 months, which is September, October. We have one November, and we'll pick up again in January. I think January or February, depending on all of the events that are taking place between Black History and the observances of Dr. King's birthday and holiday. And so this particular session, let me say first that last month's session is streaming. You can go to our page, to our website, and you can find it. And the theme for last month was politics and public policy. And so all of these will be added as we go, so you can go back and look at them. Today is a real special one, and the theme for today is the politics of hate. And I want to tell you, when this was being planned and title was being done and everything, we really had no idea of the state of affairs that we now have on a global scale. But it makes our discussion even more important in terms of us being here today. And so the format for this is going to be in this order. We have a number of people who are going to come, the first of whom is going to be our district attorney, Summer Steffen. And the DA has really led the fight in terms of hate crimes. As you saw a few weeks ago in the Voice and Viewpoint and on local media, they indicted 17 Hell Angels for the brutal attack on 3 African-American males last June 6th. And that's commendable, because I've been covering hate crimes in the Voice and Viewpoint since 1987, when Congress was still making adjustments. And over the years, I followed it, and many times there were situations that should have been classified as hate crimes, and local law enforcement wouldn't do so because that meant they had to do paperwork. So the reporting was always off, and it began to grow, and we know that we got a major booster shot with what happened in Atlanta and the movements to really unite in terms of the AAPI movement and the call for an education approach to this. And the educational approach is important because, as the DA is going to point out, a lot of people don't know what constitutes a hate crime. And hate crime is not always physical. It can be verbal. And so what we do is, this morning, is we have people from several communities that are going to come and speak with us as well about the experience in their communities. And so I'm very happy that one of the people that we have here today is Sister Zaheen. How do I say it? Tazeen. Okay. She is from the Council on Arab-Islamic Relations, and we met a couple of months ago in Sacramento when we were at another event. And so it's very important that we hear from communities, because Now the FBI is reporting an increased number of incidents, and you saw what happened in Chicago a couple of days ago when the 6-year-old was killed by the landlord just because of their nationality. And so we're going to have some comments today from the areas of the community. I'm also going to have hear from Sister Camille Applesy, who is with Indian Voices. And one of our mandates under our ethnic media outreach approach to stop the hate, you see the banners that we have here. We have a phone number. We have a QR code. The state has provided all kinds of information to help with this fight. And so we're not just discussing the crimes and the issues, but we're also going to be talking about what some of the solutions are. And we want solutions, and we want recommendation, and we want dialogue, because the dialogue gets to be extremely important in terms of people talking. Now, I don't want you to think I'm going to get up here and give you a long speech, because some of you look at me like, oh, here he goes. That's not going to be the case. But I am going to take a couple of minutes to say some overview things about hate itself, because I think it's very important that we do so. And so when summer comes, she's going to help share with you the fact that it's so ironic. African Americans have the highest incidence of hate crime statistically in the state. And I've always been amazed that we could never get the funding that came along after the AAPI incidents, which put several $100 million on the table, and we all kind of became collateral beneficiaries of the movement. But be that as it may, the important thing is that we have the dialogue and that it's going. Now, let me say something about this whole issue of the politics of hate. Because some people say, well, what do you mean the politics of hate? First of all, the definition of hate. Because different people have different definitions, and it's because hate is not something that is concrete necessarily in the thought process. It's an emotional response. And many years ago, they taught us in logic that you can argue with what a person thinks, but you can never argue with what they feel. And so the politics of hate comes in because we find that when one group of people or individuals encounter someone or people that are different from them, they're going to have one of two reactions. They're either going to like them, but at the same time, they're going to be trying to think about what the level of that relationship is going to be. And so we've seen historically that one particular group has approached the world from the standpoint of, hello, I'm in charge, whatever you have belongs to me, and let's go from there. Last week, we just had the celebration of Indigenous Peoples Day, as someone probably got wise enough to realize that Columbus was lost when he came here, and he didn't really know where he was. And if you just think about Cortez as well, landing on the beach in Mexico, holding up the flag in name of God and country, declaring somebody else's home is now his land. And so the hate comes in because what has to happen is, in order to take something from someone else, you have got to change their status on the scale of humanity. You have got to dehumanize them. We saw that happen with us, the way so many of us, people that look like me, came over on ships. And we didn't come over on the Nina, the Pina, and the Santa Maria. You know, we came on down in the basement, and it wasn't a cruise ship that brought us here, and we didn't ask to come. And so what we find in the history of this country, that even when they were drafting the Constitution, they couldn't acknowledge us as a person. And when we came along with Alex Haley and we started doing our search, some people, it took them a while to realize if you want to find where black people were, you have to look at livestock and chattel, because we were considered property and not people. And so when we come on down to where we are today, America in particular has had a history of one group of people trying at all times to stay in charge and on top of everybody else but that group. And it becomes political because of just looking at our history. In order to vote at one point, there was a poll tax. And if you didn't hold property, you couldn't pay the tax, so you couldn't vote. In order to participate in government, you needed some degree of education. It was against the law to teach us to read. And even to this day, civics as taught in schools in America is not inclusive of the political process because it's not intended for the masses to understand that. If you look at the race hatred issue, you'll find ironically that a group of whites told other whites, many of them in the South, that you might be poor and you might be white, but you're better off than these other folks. And so the politics of hate gave them justification for feeling that they were above someone else, when in many cases they were beneath the people, just in terms of their education, their lifestyle, literacy, the whole bit. In this country, most of the people who have been on welfare have predominantly been white. In this country, welfare has been identified as something given to poor people, but when it comes to rich people, it's called subsidies. It's the same thing. Okay, why do you think you got cheese on everything now? Don't you know it was a day you couldn't find cheese unless they were giving you a block of it from agriculture? Y'all don't remember the cheese blocks, okay? You don't know about that, okay? Well, you got a big block of cheese and you cut off a thick piece like that, you know. When I went into the induction center in the Army and they make you come and you know you're gonna be drafted, they give you a little lunch bag and it's got a piece of cheese about that thick on 2 slices of bread and an apple, okay? And that's your meal. Because they had to do something with the cheese because they had to give us subsidies to the dairy people. There's a subsidies for honey. And let's not talk about the land subsidies. The Bureau of Land Management, you got all of these big cattle things like you see on Yellowstone. That land belongs to the government. And what the government does, it puts out a bid. Certain people in the area make a bid. So you might get 1,000 acres for 20 years at $5 an acre, and you're not paying tax on it. That's welfare. That's a subsidy. But when it comes to people of color, all of a sudden we have a problem. So my concluding comment is this. Today, we're in a crisis in America, and the crisis is, in this country in particular, the crisis is because of the browning of America. America is no longer majority white, and the projections are what it's going to look like going forward in the future. Do you know that's scary for a lot of older people, like the man where the young black kid knocked on the wrong door and the 80-year-old white man shot him through the glass just because he knocked? Because there's a fear, you see. And so the fear is justified by converting it to hate. I hate you because you're here. I hate you because you look different. I hate you because I don't like the way your hair is, okay? I hate you because you're dark, but every chance I get, I'm on the beach trying to get a tan. But I still hate you for having yours, okay? Maybe because I didn't get a tan. I don't know, all right? But the hate is, the politics are connected to the hate. And that's what I want you to do today. As we look at the hate, let's look for the politics behind the hate. If you don't believe it, how is it that we're still talking about reparations for black people, especially in this state where so much property was taken from us, okay? I ain't even talking about the global thing, but guess what? About 25 years ago, we did all kinds of things for Japanese Americans, okay? We could identify the people who were put in those camps, who lost their property. We made money available. We did everything, but when it has come to us, America cannot find a way to do its fair share. You heard the expression 40 acres and a mule. That was a lie that was put out following the Civil War, and although it was intended to happen, it was canceled as quickly as possible. And so when we talk about hate today, I want you to know politics are very much involved in hate. Well, what is politics? Politics is the distribution of a limited amount of resources over a larger number of people. It's often referred to as a pie. And so the more people sitting at the table, the slice is going to be smaller. You know, like when you get dessert at a restaurant, they give that little slither of cheesecake. instead of a bigger piece that you could enjoy, because more people got to be in on it, okay? And then we came to understand that if you're not sitting at the table, then so many of us are on the menu. So that's politics, all right? And so they're telling me on the clock I want to move forward. I want to bring up at this point San Diego District Attorney Summer Stephens, who is going to talk to us for a few minutes about some things. And let me say that we have done several of these sessions, webinars, we've town hall meetings, we've done Zoom, we've done all of this stuff. Yes. Okay? And so here we go one more time. And let me just move this, and yes, you can use the mic.
Great.
Now step over here.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. Thank you for those opening remarks. I definitely much prefer if I have the menu than be on the menu. I'm sure everybody here appreciates that. So thank you for your hospitality and for taking on this issue. We've done a couple of these informational sessions with Ms. Maxwell and Dr. Warren, and a very engaging conversation, but this is really good to be in the room with you. So to kind of set a little bit of the background, I'm going to take about 10 minutes to give you an overview of hate crimes. And many of you really understand this issue, but you might not be aware of all the legal requirements and why it is so underreported. We do believe it's one of the most underreported crimes, and that's because there is a lot of shame in it, where the victim doesn't want to share what happened to them because somehow they feel that there's something about them that allowed this other person to act the way they did. And we want to remove that because it is never about the victim. It's about the actions of the offender. We want to increase reporting because that's how we bring accountability. So this is part of the journey. I've been in the DA's office 33 years. That's, for anyone counting, that's longer than I've been alive, not at the DA's office. You know, a lot of people don't know, and I think it's relevant to this conversation, why I even pursued being in the DA's office. And that's because when I was 12 years old, I saw an image of some girls that looked like my age in North Africa, a region called Socotra. And these girls were so beautiful, and they you know, I felt their spirit, and they looked like me, but they did not have my life. They had fear in their eyes and hopelessness because of the abuse and the terror they were experiencing. And at that moment, I realized, and somehow, even though I was only 12, I knew that what I would do with my life is maybe I can't remove this from the world at large, but if I can remove this look of hopelessness and fear and replace it with a look of belonging and confidence and hope, then that's what I wanted to do. So that was a natural journey for me to protect the most vulnerable, create units that address the most vulnerable, like human trafficking, sex crimes, child abuse. But as I grew in the profession, I realized that one of the crimes that we don't talk about as much are hate crimes. And that's because hate crimes, they do something. And what they do, and there's actually a case that talks about this. So as a lawyer, it comes back to a case, even though we understand it from our experience, that essentially you're never just victimizing one person. You are victimizing everybody in the community that shares their identity, their race, their religion, their ethnicity, their gender. You essentially take out one person through your hate, but you leave a ripple effect where everyone and every child in that community feels that fear and that trepidation. And this is why we haven't taken it as seriously as we should in our nation. We're not going to be able to get over our history or deal with our history or address with our history, if we can't today address the hate crimes that are happening in current day in the United States and in California and right here in San Diego, because that is part of the history. So we specialized in our office in hate crimes because they are so hard to prosecute, and became the gold standard where other regions call us to say, how are you doing this? How are you successfully taking these cases to juries? Just like the case we just took to a jury where a man was, an African-American male that was living out of his van, was cleaning his van. And this man came up and just essentially punched him, hit him, and then he threw a rock and destroyed the only thing he had, which is his van, broke the windows out of the place that he would feel some safety, that home. So, you know, he wanted a deal, but there was a message to be sent that you cannot do that. So this went to a jury trial. And fortunately, our jurors are seeing this. They're seeing that this is a true violation, and they did convict in this case of 2 counts of hate crimes. So what is a hate crime? So it's a hate-based crime. That's the easiest way to remember it. So there has to be a crime first. This is what distinguishes it from hate incidents. Hate incidents may be situations that don't have a crime, but you know they're hateful. It's those slurs, that terrible speech, that not serving someone, not giving them their health benefits because you're looking at them and you think they somehow don't deserve your attention. It's those things that happen that are hate incidents. But what is required for my office to act is a crime that is based in hate. And does it have to be based entirely in hate? The answer is no. It has to substantially be motivated by hate. For example, you could be robbing someone, and so you want the money, you're committing a robbery, but you also targeted that person because you thought maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable calling police, like somebody who's undocumented from another country. You want the money, but you also have a substantial factor of being motivated by hate, not as the sole purpose. So it's possible that you want this black business like we had in Oceanside. You want it to go out of business because it's doing really well serving coffee. You want to do that, but you also are substantially motivated by hate. So you make their life hellish by defacing their building and doing terrible things. It still needs to be looked at deeply as, is it a hate crime? Like the protesters in Imperial Beach County, where where they were protesting after the George Floyd horrific murder, and somebody came up and they threw eggs at them. You had to look beneath the surface. That means, is it just like they thought they're going to throw eggs? No, you go to their Facebook, you do the work, you do search warrants, you download their information to find out what are they talking about, what are they looking at, what is motivating them, because you have to prove that hate intent. So in hate crimes, we're looking for any crime, vandalism, simple assault, a battery, all the way up to murder, or attempt murder, like the recent incident we had, but is substantially motivated by hate. Normally, there's no confession to that. There's usually words that are spoken, like slurs, that go along with the hate crime. It makes a difference because when you label it a hate crime, you're dealing with it square on. And all the people that relate to the person who's the victim understand that we are seeing them. We are seeing this for what it is. So it's very important. It's also important because it elevates misdemeanor conduct to felony conduct under the law. So if you take a simple, like that case where you threw eggs, that normally would be a misdemeanor because someone wasn't injured badly. But because of the proof of the hate crime, that became a felony case. So it elevates a misdemeanor to a felony, a vandalism to a felony. It's very serious. It takes already a felony and makes it an enhanced felony with 1, 2, or 3 years additional. So in all these respects, it's really important. Now let's talk quickly about data and statistics. Hate crimes continue to climb, especially against African American people. That is just the data shows it. It's just the reality. So we saw this climb, and we saw that there was a lot of focus on anti-Asian hate, which is very important. But one of the reasons there was a focus on it is because anti-Asian hate had actually gone down to almost zero in San Diego County. And all of a sudden with COVID, it shot up. And around the nation, it shot up. But the hate crimes against African Americans had always been high. So it had not shot up, but it didn't go away, but it was never addressed, which is a problem. So just as an example, between 2020 and 2021, hate crimes rose in the state of California by 32%. In San Diego, we reviewed an additional 38% of cases between 2020 and 2021. And then that increase continued between 2021 and 2022. Now, I don't believe, and maybe I'm just because I'm a cup half full person, that San Diego has more hate crimes. What I believe is from my experience in sex crimes, that when Dr. Warren and leaders put a spotlight on it and educate the community, there is more reporting. And reporting is a good thing because that's how you bring accountability. I believe it rose like the state, but not even more in San Diego, but that because there is more trust systems and more reporting, we were able to see more cases. We also increased our prosecution by 42%. So what did we do? We met the demand, which is awful, but we over-met it. We went to town to address this increase. Now, let me give you just some 2023 numbers, which will give you an idea about the years past. So far this year, we've had 18, so before I say that, just to set the stage, hate crimes are a crime committed against a protected class. So that's race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, or disability. Those are the protected classes. So race-based hate crimes, we had 18 cases that we prosecuted, 2023 so far. Of these 18 race-based cases, how many do you think were African American? Think about our population of being just 5 to 10%. 13 of those 18 cases were against African Americans that we're prosecuting. We prosecuted just this year. 2 were Hispanic, 2 were anti-Asian, and 1 was anti-Arab, so an ethnicity. So those are the race-based. We had 2 religion-based that were anti-Jewish. We had 1 gender-based on a transgender, and 2 sexual orientation prosecutions against a gay male. So that is the data this year. So again, overwhelmingly, you see the trend in this that's happening. Now, what happened with anti-Asian hate when the money came in, the federal law came in, what happened? It went down by 40%. When you bring a national attention and spotlight, it does make a difference. So that's a good thing, but we have to do it as to all classes of people that are hurt. I wanted to, I can't talk about this case because it's a current case, the Hells Angels case, but it is a first of its type to bring a white gang with a gang allegation and a hate crime allegation all together because of this senseless stabbing and beating of 3 African American men. And it is sending a ripple effect because taking action does matter. And I can tell you that grand jury had no questions about this, and we're hoping to go forward in the right light. So what can we do about this? We have to increase reporting. Why? Because we want hate incidents. Remember, I told you hate incidents can't be prosecuted, but we want them reported. And we want hate crimes reported. And the reason is that hate incidents are often precursors to hate crimes. What mass shooter have we ever seen that hasn't transmitted some manifesto, some language to indicate what they're thinking, what they want to do? So words are often precursors to violence. If it's reported, we had one case where is a great example where words were reported. A guy came and he praised a killer, a hate killer, at work. His coworkers reported it. And the police had discussions with our hate crimes division. They talked about it, and they decided this is too much going on. They did research into open source intelligence to see what this man was about. Clearly, he was getting radicalized. So we did a search warrant and recovered an arsenal. He was preparing for the next attack and stopped it. More recently, we had something like that happen with one of our schools. You don't hear about when a crime is prevented. You only hear when the crime happened. But the goal is always to stop something terrible from happening by being alert, by having a community that's engaged, that's reporting incidents, reporting crimes, so that we can take action to hopefully prevent it. We don't need the headline for preventing it. We just can sleep better at night knowing our children, our communities are safe. So prevention is really, really key. So I'm gonna stop right here, which is really good for a lawyer. I just want you to know, because I can keep talking. And I'll just be around for questions.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. You can sit up here if you will.
Sure.
If you like. Okay. Thank you so very much. This is an ongoing project, needless to say, and we're going to entertain in a Q&A session. But first, I want to get the other speakers up so you can hear from them. Sister Tahine, I want you to come up next with you. She's the executive director of the Council on Arab-Islamic Relations. And what we're trying to do is just really be super inclusive with all of our communities, because so many times the ethnic communities are left out. And so I wanted to come up and say a few words in terms of your organization, what it is that you're trying to do. We know you hear some incidents of hate, but you might have a couple of suggestions to make the folks. So feel free. Leave the mic here. You're very welcome.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace be upon you all. Good morning. As Dr. Barber said, my name is Tazeen Nizam, and I am the Executive Director of the San Diego Office of Council on American Islamic Relations. I'm sorry, Dr. Barber, I have to correct that. It is not just Arab, because that's one of the things that we have a very conflated identity. People think that Muslims belong to the Arab world. There are Muslims all across the world, all across. So the biggest Muslim population is in Indonesia. The second Muslim population is in India, where I am from, the other coast where Columbus was actually supposed to end up, but ended up here on this side. So the Arab community is not just the smallest, but like it's a small part of the Muslim world. The Muslim world is all across, spread in so many different places that you wouldn't even think about. There is a very large Muslim population in China, and currently they are facing atrocities at the hand of the Chinese government. The Uyghur population have been enslaved, prisoned, and some of them don't even know where their family members have been taken. Muslim populations across the world have seen at Islamophobic rhetoric, and hate crimes, hate incidences are not a new thing to our community as well. Some people think that Muslims are a new advent to Americas. Some of the first ships that brought slaves were Muslims. A lot of the Muslim African countries were where the first slaves came from. So Islam and Muslims have been a fabric of this nation from the very beginning. For the past 400 years, Muslims have been here. Some have practiced their faith all along, some have lost it. But that's all right, because we're all children of God. So and we all worship the one creator who brought us all here. Thank you. So as just Attorney Summer mentioned, hate incidences in California have increased. And thanks to the efforts of the DA's office and organizations like Ethnic Media and a spotlight on AAPI, the reporting is what actually has increased. And there's reasons people don't report. People don't report a crime, like the DA said, because they're undocumented. People don't report because they feel responsible. This is not a good analogy, but similar to a rape victim, somehow we are made to feel that if something happened to us, we had some contributing factor to it, which is not true. It's about the act. As the DA mentioned, it's about the perpetrator. It is not about the victim. And thus, thank you, ma'am. And this is an effort that as a community, as a people who are facing this, we need to instill in going forward. The first attempt that we can do as encouraging our kids, when our kids feel bullying at school, then they can report it to us, to their teachers, to their administrators. That's where we can start instilling this concept of if something happens to you, step up and say something. And that's where we can encourage that. God forbid something happened to them along the way, they're able to come forward and report it. I can go on and on because as the district attorney mentioned, we have a tendency, we get a mic, we go on and on, but we won't do that. We will reserve our time for questions because I know that there are many things that neither one of us can cover because there's so many questions that encompass all this space. As mentioned earlier, the global situation right now is volatile at best, but also atrocious, also one-sided, also misinformed and misreported. Unfortunately, our US media has not been doing a very fair and just job for it, and social media is a big culprit in it. I asked my 17-year-old the other day, and I said, what do you think about the situation? What are your, because she is very involved, so she knows more, but her schoolmates, I asked her, how do your schoolmates react? And she goes, Mom, you're giving too much credit to the high schoolers. They only go by what they see first on social media. And unfortunately, that's with a lot of us. It's easy to grasp that little itty-bitty sensational piece on social media and go with it. So I encourage you all to dig a little deeper, go to the right resources, and please see me afterwards. I can direct you to some of them, and get to the bottom of this. Because I promise you, when you get to the bottom, your humanity will be invoked. You will not be able to make those unjust statements that we hear in our regular media. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is Sister Rachel Evans here? Rachel? Okay, she was to have joined us from Somali Family Services. And Susan, Susan here? Okay. Susan, would you come on up? Susan is publisher of the Filipino Press here in San Diego. And we've been colleagues for many, many years. And when I told her about this event, she was very excited about the chance to be here because our ethnic media, and that's the base group, our ethnic media is the one that's going to do the reporting and helping to define some of the things that are being mentioned. So Susan, I'd like for you to take the mic here for a few moments. Tell them of any experiences you have within your community. And after that, we're going to hear from Indian Voices and open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Dr. John Warren. And first and foremost, good morning to everyone and Attorney Stephen. And where do we start? I guess it starts from here, sharing our stories and making sure that we share it to the people that we connect with our families, and we also connect it to the proper media, who would be able to assist us in making sure that the experiences that you have in terms of hate are communicated. We have heard of Asian hate with people being hurt just, without any provocation on their part. And, the Asians, or even Filipinos, I should say, I should speak about Filipinos. They're known for, most of the time, either shy or not, they don't speak all the time or communicate their feelings and their wants. And so the thing is, even if sometimes they're already hurt, sometimes they would be afraid. I think that's one of the things. They're afraid for themselves. They're afraid for their family, because there might be retaliation. And I think that is something that we could address by making sure that the people our community are informed, educated, and be able to identify what are the resources that are available. I can see that we have here a banner that says, California is for everyone, and that includes an 833 or 800 number. What about the local number that we could call or reach out to locally? Because I think that would minimize the hesitation, especially if it's available, whether in print, in flyers, on posters, or whatever, that people can, can pay attention to. And we also want to know, you mentioned that one of the sources of misinformation is social media. So how do we curtail that by telling people, okay, for the information that you receive, what is your source? So if the source is credible, if the source is, that it's providing misinformation, then you as an adult or family should point out that, that could be fake news, and you have to verify the information by checking the sources. I've been publishing the Filipino Press, or involved with the Filipino Press for the last 32 years. And although it says the Filipino Press, our approach has always been multicultural in business and in developing relationships with different communities. We know that is a valuable tool for our communities because it educates them, it inspires them, and we believe, strongly on education. Most of the Filipino immigrants, we work hard in order to have a space for us and be able to progress. And sometimes I think what causes hate is when somebody is jealous of somebody's accomplishments. And sometimes it's also lack of understanding of the culture and people lacking in cultural sensitivity. So that means to say that we have to provide cultural sensitivity training. And I think also as the community, the way to do that is to actually, if we have festivals or events or informational seminars, we encourage other communities to attend. So that way they can experience some cultural immersion by engaging our community, by taking part on the food that we eat, and be able to communicate on a one-to-one basis and know what are the likes, what are the prejudices, or what are the don't like. And I think when it comes to the word, let's say, abuse, for example, some cultures may think that so-and-so is not an abuse, but in other culture, this is an abuse. And there are different, I think, levels or different definitions of abuse, because in some communities, verbal abuse is not an abuse. Sometimes it could be in terms of endearment. So at any rate, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Take a seat there.
Okay, thank you.
Q&A we're about to do. All right? Okay. The last person to come up, certainly not least, is Camille Appling, and she is representing Indian Voices. And, a lot of people are not aware of the ethnic papers we have, but we've always been kind of a tight-knit organization here. The other one that's missing, Fanny is not well this morning, and we haven't been successful with Asian Journal. They have some changes. So Camille, if you would come up. Many of you know Sister Rose Davis, who does Indian Voices. It's a small paper, but it's also very much involved. And when we were in Sacramento last month, there was an ethnic media awards program. There was a very strong turnout of Native American communities in California who were concerned about the kind of things that we're talking about that often go unreported just because they take place on the reservation or they are removed from social media. You don't have a whole bunch of internet in many instances. So I just want you to just say a few words before we do Q&A in terms of Indian Voices and any experiences that you all might have had.
Good morning. My name is Camille Appling, and I have been working in community outreach for the Indian Voices newspaper for probably about 3 or so years. I'm really grateful to participate in this, and I just wanted to extend gratitude and blessings over all of you. We're currently working on a project called the Stop the Hate Initiative, and what we do in our section of the newspaper is really have discussions about politics, cultural arts, community involvement, and different things like that to really address the sensitivity of the hate crimes. And when these things take place, we can't always predict and can't always say when and how, but we can address the actual healing part after these things occur. So we really like to encourage cultural sensitivity, engaging in different political and social events from the different cultures that are represented in San Diego. We really like to focus on the cultural arts that exist after the incidences have occurred. So we want to make sure that people know about the different healing arts that occur, the different sensitivities that we can have prior to the person committing these crimes. If you're immersed in the Latino community or the Black community or the Arab community or the Filipino or Asian community or the Islander community, it's more difficult to commit these crimes if you have sensitivities to the people that are associated with it. When I was younger, we participated in the Camp Anytown program, which was very clear about making real connections with people that are both diverse and making it sensitive to their issues in their life goals. So with Indian Voices, we just want to make sure that people know that there's a couple of areas that we address. The Stop the Hate Initiative, which is definitely with politics and discussions like this for prevention, especially when there's people that make decisions and statutes that make it easier and possible for us to prevent these crimes. And we also want to make sure that the cultural arts and the actual art of healing is addressed so that people have a place to go to diffuse the pain that occurs from prejudice and racism and even physical or other types of abuse. So I just want to thank you for your time today, and I encourage you to look up some of these programs and take a look at what we're working on, and really encourage other people through interaction. Some people like dance, so you can go to a traditional arts dance. I'm a big food person, so I learned from my Filipino aunties a closer relationship with food, the good way, and so there's a lot of ways that we can build relationships, and a lot of ways that we can really allow someone to heal from prejudice through sensitivity and patience. So please check us out in Invoices, and we're absolutely smitten with the opportunity to work with Dr. Warren. Thank you.
At this point, we want to open it up for the questions and give answers. We'd like very much, as you come up, we're going to have the mic passed. Please be brief and considerate of time for others. If we have issues that you really need more time on, once we cut off the actual taping at 9 and we're on schedule, then we'll stay for any additional discussions, those that can with you. So we're going to ask for brief answers from our panelists and specific questions from you. First, identify yourself.
Francine Maxwell, Southeastern San Diego resident. D.A. Summer, if you could speak to the national organization that you're on and how we can support you to get your national organization to help Black people get our fair share of the pie on hate crime money.
Thank you so much for that question. So I'm involved in the National Association, National District Attorneys Association, and this is a 50-year-old organization that represents all of the elected and district attorneys across the United States. I try to spend most of my time in San Diego because I'm frankly obsessed with you all and San Diego. I don't like to leave town, but it did seem like a really good opportunity to be able to leverage more federal resources, learn how the system works so that I can bring more resources to San Diego. And humbly, I was voted president-elect, which means I'll be the incoming president for this National District Attorneys Association. And thank you. And with that, the reason this is a good thing is because this is a priority for me, fighting hate crimes, and it will give us an opportunity to understand and meet at the Capitol there's a yearly advocacy program where we meet with different legislators, and one of the top things on my agenda will be to discuss how we make this a national issue, bring funding down, not just for law enforcement and prosecution, but for the victim advocacy and the community advocacy that needs to happen in order for people to feel comfortable reporting, and also for people, as was mentioned, to heal from the trauma of hate crimes and racism. Thank you.
Okay. Next question or comment? Oh, no thoughts about this? That's amazing. Yes, ma'am. Right over here. If you stand, she'll bring the mic to you.
Hi, thank you. In my personal experience, individually.
Oh, we can't hear the mic. Just a
Can you hear
moment. Mic's not on.
Lights on. Testing one. Testing 1, 2.
She's bringing a mic to you to switch out. Thank you.
Testing. Thank you. In my personal experience, individually and from within the Black community as a whole, the reporting of hate crimes has less to do with shame and more to do with the precedents that has been set historically with the country, with the founding of the country. Dr. Warren spoke briefly on that in regard to voting. The hate crimes and the injustice is so layered and so multifaceted What advice do you have on empowering communities to report this information from within a system that is so complacent and complicit within the behavior? So my comment or my feedback is part comment and part question. I also just wanted to mention, even within the past year, the incident that happened with the young lady in Santee, as it was being addressed with the community, you quickly saw that law enforcement tried to quickly dismiss the racial undertone of that. And so we see incidences like that all the time. And so just wanted to know what you guys think can be done about that.
Well, Ms. Williams, is that addressed to the district attorney or just the panel in general? Or
Primarily the district attorney, but also the panel in general if they have feedback. I do appreciate our one speaker who mentioned the hotline. I thought that was a good idea if it doesn't already exist.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question. And while I cannot, because in this particular case, it was a juvenile case, I can assure you that we would not have dismissed the hate crime allegation, that if there was a hypothetical scenario where a young girl was stabbed because of racism and hate, that people would be held to account, even in the juvenile system, and they would face the hate crime allegation because it applies to juveniles and adults. So thank you for that question. So because of this issue, what we did is we did set up a hotline in the DA's office, and the number, there's a phone number and an email, and the phone number is 619-515-8805. The email is hatecrimes@sdcda.org, or you can go to sandiegoda.com and find it by looking at helping victims, and you'll find all of the information. And one of the reasons we did that is because the underreporting sometimes is the feeling that maybe no one is going to care and no one is going to act. And also sometimes the feeling that, is it a 911 call or is it not? Or is it a hate incident or is it a hate crime? All the things that are very complicated that we put on people. So we still want people to call 911 no matter what negative experience might have had in the past. We do believe that this has been a focus in San Diego, that there's been a lot of investment and training for law enforcement, and that there is a commitment when I meet with all the police chiefs and sheriff to hate crimes. Does it translate down to every person on the ground? I don't think any leader, including myself, will tell you that that is the case, because it's a constant journey towards fair and equal justice for all. And we have to remain on this journey. But we wanted to create this hotline, so if somebody is just not comfortable calling the police because they don't know if it's a crime or not, or what response they'll get, they have another avenue to report. And they will get a call back within 24 hours by a specialized hate crimes person, and the victim advocate will follow up. So the experience we hear has been very good with this hotline. Now, some regions have set up a general hotline, and there's nothing wrong with exploring that. It's just that then there's not a specific action point. When the call does come or the report to our office, we're able to triage it and let the caller know, this is a hate incident, this is what you need to do. You need to document everything that's happening with your neighbor. Write it on a log so you don't forget date and time. This is what we tell everybody. Because even though right now it might not rise to the level of a hate crime, we want you to log everything so that if, God forbid, something happens, you have the past and the present documented. Thank you.
Also want to add the incident that you made reference to in Santee. That's a perfect example of people other than the victim reporting what took place and continuing to report it and to stay on it, because the victims had one set of circumstances they were dealing with, but the community rallied as a result of the reports coming from other people. And so that the community in San Diego went out to Santee, and sometimes there were some issues out there. because I think until the community from San Diego went out there, in some instances, the sheriff's department, which provides police services to an area like Santee, they were more pro, shall we say, I can say this, Summer can't. They were almost sympathizers with what was taking place. They were trying to downplay it, and this was the problem for many years in San Diego. Before we got a district attorney like this, the people that we had in the past, they didn't want to report it. They would ignore the race part of it, and if they didn't include that, then they didn't have to forward a copy to the Justice Department in terms of trying to track what's happening nationally. So your observations, and Summer mentioned social media, because people put those observations on social media, just like they go after the incidents, and you look at these people's pages, and they tell you a whole lot more about them, that it wasn't just, an accident. They fell out of bed and decided to go shoot someone. Stuff was planned, and so this gets to be a major issue. So it's a very important observation for all of us. You might see something. There used to be an expression, if you see something, say something, because you don't know whose life you might be saving in terms of the observation. Additional question or comment? Yes, right here. She's coming the other way. She's bringing your mic. Okay. And then we're going to have closing remarks from our panelists so you can prepare for your closing comments. Yes.
Oh, yes. I just had a question as it relates to the DA's office. I know in one of your examples you mentioned someone making hate-filled comments in the workplace, and I understand that certain hate incidents may not rise to being a hate crime. Do you refer individuals from or to other agencies, for example, if someone's experiencing harassment or people are making hate-filled comments in the workplace, that could fall under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which investigates employment discrimination, or the California Civil Rights Department that also investigates employment discrimination. So I just wondered what resources you point people to if something happens that doesn't rise to a hate crime, but is a hate incident that perhaps another agency might have jurisdiction over.
Yes, absolutely. It's to give people an answer, so it's to validate their feelings and what they're experiencing. So even though something isn't a crime, doesn't mean it's not morally and ethically wrong, So we do refer them to workplace harassment, to county HR, to all of these places, the Fair Employment and Housing, all of the different resources where if we think in triage, that's where it belongs. We're not, we are focused on looking if there is a crime, and I want to make sure I don't leave the impression that words can't amount to a crime. If the words threaten violence, threaten physical harm to you or your loved one, then they can amount to a crime. It's the crime of making criminal threats. So not all words are okay and protected under the First Amendment. So this is why this is nuanced, that sometimes it's hard for people to know whether it's a crime or not. This is why we wanted to open the door to report hate incidents. And sometimes it's turned out to be a crime. Yes, they're words, but they're words that threaten immediate harm. And then we help guide them to what police department to report. We call ahead to say, this report is coming, and we connect our hate crimes division with that particular police department. So it's another avenue.
Okay. Yes, over here, and then we'll come.
I have a comment and then a question. First off, I want to congratulate you all for putting in the work. But I'm curious as to, applaud them for the work that they've been putting in. I am originally from the Bay Area, from Oakland, California, born in the 50s. So this is reminiscent of that feel that was in the air when I was growing up, right? But I'm curious, I see a lot of teams, and there should be one team for righteousness, right? I see a lot of ethnicities, but we all got to understand we're all on the same team. A hate crime against, as I look at my sisters, is against me, right? These things persist because we don't have the unity amongst the groups. We're segregated even up here, right? Why doesn't this fall under one veil? Hate crime against people of color. Funny thing is, we're all in the same family. But you come here as a Filipino, you come here as a Muslim, you come here this, but we're all the same family, truly. And the black man is the originator of all of this family. But you come here and in America, you get separated and you fall into your niche so that you can get by, right? And at the bottom of the pile is the black man. It should be a reawakening, a re-education by the educators, by doctors, and by everybody to put us all on the same team, sitting up here together, working together. So when something happens in your community, it happens in my community. When it happens in your community, it happens in my community. And there's power in numbers. There can only be one team.
Well, that is indeed what we're all about here. And that's why this is under ethnic media outreach, because it unifies all of us as victims that are having the same problems. So you're on target, and that's what we're doing. Over here, please, Mr. Berry.
Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Donna DeBerry from the Black Chamber, and my question for you is, the three of you, what have you learned from the Black experience around our hate crime that happens every day? Are there things that you've learned from us that you do differently, or are there things that you can even teach us that's different?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, so just to tag along from what the gentleman said, yes, we are one team, but we have been divided by deep-seated colonial rule for generations and generations. And that divide and rule has gone so deep, it's going to take some time for us to unroot it, right? It's like that vicious tree in your yard that keeps digging its roots in your house and in your walls and on your sidewalk. It's like that. We have to decolonize ourselves. We have to decolonize our minds and remind ourselves that at the end of the day, all our struggles are the same. And ma'am, to your question, I want to come and say this. The Black community, their struggles, their learnings are why we have our freedoms. I, as a Muslim, are able to walk outside my home with my hijab, live where I want to, work where I want to, go to school where I want to, because my Black brothers and sisters have persevered for 400 years. But as an immigrant, a lot of my community members don't know the historical context, as history is tainted, as history books are debunked completely. So until we get to a point where we can educate, re-educate, recondition our brains to all understand the struggles of our Black communities and respect it and give it the ultimate most respect that it deserves, we are not able to actually acknowledge that your struggle has been for far longer and has laid the path for me. So let's all, as the brother said, and as you say, understand and educate, re-educate as individuals, as educators, as community members, when we reach out across political divides. That's when we are able to build bridges and make stronger community members, make stronger communities, and hopefully one day, as parents, pass on a better community to our children than we received.
That's good.
Susan?
Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. Just on the context, I was invited to speak about our community, so that's why given that context. But I do appreciate the information or the experience or the knowledge that the Black community have imparted as far as their experiences, the hardships, because it teaches us, all of us, resilience and be able to speak about what hurts us and what should be considered as justice for, for everyone. And the thing is, again, education is key. And I think we as community leaders here in this room have the shared responsibility of carrying the message of anti-hate, whether in different platforms. If some people are so much into social media, tell them, hey, let's create a balance between the written word and the social media space, because you have to realize not everybody have access to computers. Not everybody, has, so there's also, like what they call technology divide, as you could call it. So let's meet halfway, utilize the resources that we have here. Let's use the community boards in communicating that hotline number, the different high traffic areas wherein crimes could be committed, like grocery stores or other public places. I think that starts from there. Thank you.
Camille, oh, you have a mic.
I really hope that the experience...
Can't hear you.
There you go, speak a little bit louder. The Black experience has been so varied, and we really hope that people are able to discuss openly and honestly what their experience has been, and to seek the treatment or the healing that's necessary, especially from a religious base, a cultural and arts base, and maybe an educated base. And so I just think that the Black experience has been everything from physical brutality to disrespecting us in educational areas or our right to excel. And I think that the real problem can be addressed through those really honest forefronts, through religion and cultural arts.
I want to make an observation from the Native American standpoint. As you were speaking, Emil, I was remembering the Sequan tribe of the Kumeyaay Nation. 40 years ago, it was a poverty-stricken tribe. Many members look like me and you. It's so interesting how things work. They were relegated to a pile of rocks in East County. Probably the biggest thing out there was the health center, as I recall. And then the casino issue came along. And I always said God has a sense of humor, where he turned a pile of rocks into a mountain of gold. And then the nation was able to buy back a lot of the very land that had been their own before, including Singing Hills, the resorts. And what happened in the East County, so interesting, two things about this buyback expression. First, there was an effort to annex onto the reservation the land that they were buying surrounding the reservation in East County. And there was an upcry and protest against that because people didn't want to see that happening. And there were nice homes being built on the reservation, development for the members. Many things were happening in the beginning. It's also very interesting that when the slot machine issue came along, there was a lot of protests against that. And this is where the politics of hate comes in. There was protests against the slot machines. And Pete Wilson was a governor speaking out against this. And I wrote an editorial that was called Sand Creek, Wounded Knee, and Pete Wilson. And those are three efforts to wipe out Native Americans, okay? And the ultimate insult with that, let me just show you how this works. The Borrego Bank went into receivership. The bank was being lost. Viejas, I believe, and maybe Sequan, because the tribes did many things together, they made an offer to the state to buy the bank. And the response from the financial entities in the state was, what do you Indians know about banking? My response editorially was, they know enough to have enough money to buy the bank that you're losing.
That's right.
Okay. And so these are examples that you won't see it today because of the prosperity and the intertribal connections. And I forget the exact number of tribes in the state, but it's even stronger up north. And to the gentleman's comment, one of the things I like best about what they began to do was those tribes that were too small and didn't have the resources, the ones who were prospering, formed a pack, and they supported them, and they helped them get on their feet. And so when you hear the comment that was made about, yes, it has been political, because if we can stay divided, we won't come together, and then the use of our funds will be divided. When you were speaking, sister, I was remembering what happened in India, okay? I mean, first the colonists came in and just took over the people. Then people like Gandhi threw aside that education and brought the protests that set the example for King. But after Gandhi, India splits into two countries, one Hindu and one Islamic. And to this day, there's a war borderline between them. And that's all the divide and conquer syndrome. And so what we're doing today, I hope you look at this as an opening of the door. There's a QR code on these banners that will lead you to all kind of resources that the state has made available as we develop this fight for healing and this fight against hatred. And part of the fight against hatred is understanding who you hate and why you hate. I'm sorry. Thank you. There's an additional comment over here. Please.
Billy Johnson from Black Men and Women United member. They call me the mouth. My question is collaboration. We don't know what the other hand is doing. You have an event, no one reach out to include the other ones. For the panel to, how do we encourage collaboration, invite each other to other events. I'm also part of the Cooper Family Foundation, and I would love to have the Black diaspora there, as well as the community that's we shared down by Memorial. So for the community, the panel is about how can we increase our collaboration, and on the backside of that, how do we include the millennials, our kids sitting at home, who trying to get them more involved in being active.
I got to speak up on that because, first of all, and I'm going to come to your comment over here, that's what the Voice and Viewpoint does. That's what Filipino Press does. That's what Indian Voices does, Asian Journal. All of our community papers throughout the state are promoting this campaign, and we're working. We cannot make people read or respond. We still have a division, even in this town, with groups of people who don't want to come together with other groups of people. And we understand that. Some people have been conditioned going back to that little story in the letter, you know, about the slave and what we do to keep them at odds against each other. And so what we're trying to do is work against those odds to bring people to the point. Everybody that you mentioned, I'm going to get to them, but I'm going to take my time on this. Everyone that you mentioned had an opportunity to know about today. Either the paper, the internet, GOD radio, but people make choices, and choices have consequences. And one of the consequences is us still being divided out of ignorance because some people haven't learned a very old Native American adage that says, "He who leads where no one follows merely goes for a walk." And there's a lot of people walking out there. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Dr. Warren. I want to thank you so much, all of you. Sister Tassine came to the table before the breakfast, and she made a comment that just resonated with me, talking about India and the caste system, and she mentioned that it was deep-seated bigotry. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in what's going on in our own experience that we don't even know about what people are experiencing in other countries. So my question to you, Tassine, is that when you compare what was happening in India with the bigotry of the caste system, how does that compare to what you've seen in terms of racism here in the United States?
Would you pass
So, as I spoke at your table earlier about SB 403, which was a bill that was introduced by Senator Aisha Wahab, who is the first Afghan to be elected to California Senate, and she introduced a bill called SB 403, which included caste as one of the discriminatory terms, which hasn't been, and you think, caste, what is that? Caste is about heritage. Caste is about lineage, and people being discriminated on that. That means that I'm being discriminated against something that I had no control over. I was born when the Lord wanted me to be born. When I wanted to be born, I wished I was a little younger, but you know, it is what it is. So having those kind of seeded discriminations in you. Now, mind you, the caste system is pre-descendant to colonialism, so we can't even blame the colonist for it. Caste system, racism, all these isms are based on control, power of one, somebody said earlier, power of one individual over another, the superiority hierarchy of assets and beauty, all these things that have been so engraved and deep-seated in us causes us to discriminate against another, causes us, what is discrimination? It's my actions based on my deep-seated beliefs against you. What is racism? When I act on those beliefs and I cause harm to you. That's the deep-seatedness, how far it goes, and how it dictates a lot of our behaviors. A lot of us don't realize that we all have biases. We all do, right? That's just the bottom truth of it, right? I have a deep-seated bias against onions. I just say them, right? But that is something that my parents let me thrive in when I was little. I lived with it, and I grew up with it. My mother let me buy with it. So I grew up with it, and I still have it. Now, that's just a funny example of my bias. But there are a lot of different biases that are given to us as inheritance. They may not be explicitly spoken about, but those subtle comments that we make at the dinner table, those subtle actions that we take, when you've all heard the example of when a white person is walking by and they see a black man crossing on the other side, they clutch their purse, right? That's bias. Now, that may not have been taught to this white person, but the news media, their parents, their communities, the news flashes that they've received over generations is so deep-seated that we act on it. Now, there's another level to this which is so grotesque that my stomach churns at it. A lot of this bias, a lot of this racism, and all these isms are state-sanctioned, are government-sanctioned, right? When the President of the United States stands in front of the nation and lies about things that he sees, where do we go with that? Now, that the White House walked that statement back, the Israeli government walked that statement back when he said that he saw babies being beheaded. But the damage has already been done. We are seeing the damage and the influence of it on our school campuses. There was a protest on UCSD campus led by Israeli protesters. And for no ungodly reason, they decided to harass the Palestinian students that were tabling for Rush Week or something. Right? We saw that the Islamic Center of San Diego, there were vandalism and there were these blue cloths tied to the fence. The PD came on space and said it can be possibly investigated as a hate crime. Now, it may not be constituting a hate crime according to the DA's definition because there was no vandalism to the effect of property damage. But the hate message has already been said. There's a school attached to the Islamic Center, and people are afraid to bring their kids. There's community members that live around there are already on guard. I got calls on Sunday asking, should I be sending my kid to school on Monday? My kid looks Arab. My kid wears a hijab to school. Just 2 days ago, we saw a 7-year-old being stabbed by their own landlord. The child has lost his life because this man had deep-seated racism, wrong information in his head, which he acted on. The mother is still in the ICU. So that's how deep it goes. And when it has that layered level of authority, government, funding, national media, social media, it just keeps burying down and below. And then we have to dig ourselves. People like us are constantly trying to dig ourselves out of this hole, barely being able to breathe. And then when we are not even able to breathe and survive because an apartheid nation decide to cage 2 million people in a 60-mile stretch, because a colonial nation came and ruled over countries like America, India, so many other countries. When that happens, and we're just barely scratching the surface to survive and live and breathe, how do we build community? How do we remind ourselves that we're all united and we need to get ahead of the curve of this when we can barely survive?
Thank you. I think this is a good note. We have to, is there another question or comment? It's going to be brief because we are stopping the recording.
Thank you.
And after Mr. Forte speaks, we have another comment here. It's 9 o'clock. If any of you have to leave based on this time, I'd ask you to do it quietly so that we can continue to address. And I'm sorry, there's also a survey form on the table, and we would ask that you fill it out. Staff, would you help collect those? And so that we can have them, and it will help us planning going forward, okay? Staff, collect. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Forte?
My name is Robert Forte, and in good conscience time, real quick. So I've worked with some of the agencies at the top of the state and here locally with Juvenile Justice Task Force. One of the things, and yes, that was an excellent segue, one of the things that I do see in common is that you guys are all women. And with that whole aspect of being all women, you all have children, I assume. So one of the things that I do know when I work with the Juvenile Justice Task Force is there's an uprising in hate that is being groomed into our children. And I would really like to know, where do you think that's coming from, groomed into our children, whether it's their peers or their parents, and how do you feel about it? And then also, one of my passionate causes is trying to figure out how do we stop giving our children felonies and grooming them for the adult system.
Mr. Forte, that was just a general comment, right? Well, what was the question? Was it the... I'll answer your question later.
The question was, how do you feel about our children being groomed to hate?
Oh, we all are opposed to children being...
Dr. Warren.
Okay, everybody up here is opposed to that. That's why we're doing all these different programs that we're trying to do. Yeah, you want to speak to it?
I think in order to address the hate from the children, it starts within the family, and also the parents being active in the PTA or in the school, so they could guide and become aware of what's going on, not only in the school but what are being taught, and then make sure that the values that they hold are imparted or imbibed by the kids.
Excuse me, those who are leaving, make sure you leave your survey form with a staff member. It only takes a moment. Go right ahead, Camille.
Well, I think that as a parent, when we start thinking about moving them away from criminal activity or being towards that way, it's important to discuss what's going on with that. Sometimes there's a lack of leadership, lack of people around that can actually provide mentorship, good examples, experience in law enforcement and in law. And I think that with my child, I really pray that he does stay away from those things. And I think that with wanting him to interact with what is right and correct, and working with people that really do support safety and justice, So I think that the real goal is to keep these programs, like I said, Camp Anytown, have open discussions if someone's wronged you, have a safe place for them to report any crimes against them, and maybe keep them safe from any criminal activity.
The district attorney has to leave, so I need her comment, then we'll get the question. But please go right ahead.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. When I leave, Cheryl Sewing-Jones, who is an amazing member of the district attorney's team, can answer any questions if they're related to the DA's office. She's right there. What I want to say is that we understand, and it can't be changed overnight. The feelings in the community, the history, it can't be removed. It just has to be understood. But I do want to tell you that there is hope in San Diego. Despite all of this, you have a DA's office that's committed. Trust us to give us the information so we can start to work on solutions. And also, speaking for my law enforcement chiefs and sheriff, they are also working hard on their teams to understand hate crimes, to help the community, to engage with the community. So give them a chance as well. And I do feel that what was mentioned, the children, the Muslim children feeling fear, that there's also Jewish children in San Diego feeling fear. And that law enforcement, we received many calls where Jewish children are afraid to go to school. Let San Diego be a place where all children feel safe. We might not be able to change the rest of the world, but with the help of the Dr. Warrens, Dr. Thompsons, and all of the leaders you see up here, let us make it a place where hope begins and where our children feel safe to go to school, no matter what their religion and what their race and ethnicity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. District Attorney Summers, your question and comment.
My comment is that thank you very much, ladies, and for coming and speaking. But I just want to say to everyone that do not be blind. Don't think that everybody has, and this is my comment, okay, that everybody is saying that, oh, we're going to have this kumbaya moment, and yet there's not going to be work that has to be done. Okay, and I just want people to understand that don't preach hate. Trust your sources, your news sources, and tell your children to check what they're looking at too. Because there is so much fake news out there, and right now we're in a time that is very crucial and critical for our children, for them to be able to see and understand what is happening in our world. So that is just my look at your sources and know that this is going to be a long process for everybody. Over.
Okay, thank you. With that, did I miss anyone? No. Let's give our panel a hand, please. We appreciate it. And we are going to do more of this. We'll ask you to stay tuned. There's still some time for discussion as we come down from here. Please continue to hand in these survey forms. We need them to help us with today. Thank the district attorney again. Thank all of you for coming out. And we are going to have another event. Did you? Leonard, the question was when the video was going to be online? He says online right now. And Leonard can tell you exactly how to get it. Say what? It's on our website. Okay, it'll be on our website with the other. And I think it's by date since the way we're running them. We're putting them up as soon as we finish. Thank you all again for being here. Thank all of you for coming out. We still have some food back there if you're still hungry. If not, we will conclude this one. Thank you again.